So let me ask you something. What are you truly deeply afraid of? I'm talking about the kind of fear that really changes how you live your life. Well, we're about to dive into a powerful, true story about a man who faced his own primal terror and came out the other side with a lesson that's, frankly, for all of us. Let's get into it. Right. We've all heard this quote probably 100 times. But what does it actually mean? Our protagonist, William Douglas, well, he basically lived the answer to that very question. He discovered that the most terrifying thing isn't the end itself, but the feeling of being afraid of it. And that little distinction, that's the key to his entire story. So this is the story of William Douglas and his lifelong battle with water. And this wasn't just, a simple dislike. No, this was a deep, primal terror that was born from a single moment in his childhood. A moment that would end up casting a shadow over his life for decades. So this fear, it started in stages. First, when he was just 3 or 4 years old, a wave at the beach just knocks him down and completely sweeps over him. He can't breathe. His father, he just laughs it off. But for little Douglas, the raw, overpowering force of water was absolutely terrifying. Then, years later, around age 10 or 11, he decides, okay, I'm going to face this. He goes to the local YMCA pool to learn. But instead of conquering it, a really cruel act of bullying pushes him to the brink of death and turns that fear into a totally paralyzing phobia. I want you to just imagine the scene for a second. The YMCA pool. It's supposed to be a safe place, right? The shallow end's only a few feet deep. Douglas is there all by himself, just waiting for others to show up. He's a little nervous, sure, but he's there to conquer his fear. But in a single terrifying moment, that safe place is about to become his absolute worst nightmare. All of a sudden, this older boy, a big bruiser as he called him, shows up. And with zero warning, he starts taunting him, yelling, "Hi, skinny, how'd you like to be ducked?" And before Douglas can even figure out what's happening, he's lifted right off the ground. It was just this sudden, senseless act of bullying that was about to change everything. And just like that, he's tossed like a rag doll straight into the deep end. He hits the water in a sitting position, and his mouth just fills with water as he instantly starts to sink. The shock is just overwhelming. He is utterly helpless, plunged right into the heart of his greatest fear. Now, the water was 9 feet deep, a measurable, finite distance. But, as you're about to see, reality was about to get completely warped by terror. In his mind, completely gripped by terror, those 9 feet might as well have been 90. And this is such a crucial insight. This is what pure fear does. It doesn't just scare us. It literally distorts our perception of reality. That slow journey to the bottom of the pool must have felt like an absolute eternity. But here's the thing. Even in his panic, his mind was fighting back. He wasn't just flailing around. He was actually thinking. He came up with a pretty clear strategy. Once his feet hit the bottom, he'd launch himself upwards, pop to the surface like a cork, and paddle to safety. It was a rational plan in a completely irrational moment, a sign of this incredible will to live. But the plan just doesn't work. He pushes off with every ounce of strength he has, but the ascent is just agonizingly slow. He opens his eyes and sees a world of sickening, dirty yellow water. His head barely breaks the surface for maybe a second, just his eyes and nose, before he starts sinking again. And that's when the first wave of real despair hits him. So he tries again. On the way down, he remembers the strategy, pushes off with everything he's got, but again, he comes up so slowly. His legs feel stiff, almost paralyzed. He's suffocating. His lungs are aching. His head is throbbing. He's getting dizzy. Stark terror has him in its grip now, and it is not letting go. And then, on that third trip down, something changes. All the effort just stops. He relaxes. His legs go limp, and a kind of blackness sweeps over his brain. The panic is gone, and in its place is this strange quiet, a peacefulness. He actually describes it as a drowsy oblivion, like being carried in his mother's arms. He was crossing into unconsciousness. The curtain of life was falling. Now, he is eventually saved. He's found lying on his stomach by the pool, vomiting water. And the bully, he just says, "I was only fooling." But for Douglas, the damage was done. The terror from that day didn't just fade away, it became this constant, haunting presence in his life. And this is so important. The fear didn't just go away, it lingered, and it crippled him for years. Every single time he got near water, An icy horror would just seize him. It ruined fishing trips, it stole the simple joy of canoeing and boating with his friends. The fear had, in his own words, completely taken possession of him, robbing his life of its simple pleasures and adventures.
Finally, years later, Douglas just decides he has had enough. He is determined to get his life back. So he hires a professional swimming instructor and commits to this systematic process, 5 days a week, an hour each day, to dismantle his fear, piece by painful piece.
You know, the instructor's approach was absolutely brilliant. He didn't just throw Douglas back in the deep end. First, he attached a rope to a belt around Douglas's waist, and he held the other end so Douglas felt safe. Then, for weeks, all they focused on was breathing, exhaling underwater, inhaling above it, over and over. After that, they worked on kicking, just holding the side of the pool until his legs, which used to freeze up in terror, finally started to obey his command. And only then did the instructor teach him how to put all the parts together. He literally built a swimmer, one component at a time. So, the instructor's work was done. Technically, Douglas was a swimmer now. But he knew this was never just about technique. He knew that the real terror, that deep-seated fear, could come back the moment he was all alone. To be truly free, he had to prove to himself that he was in control, and that meant facing the water on his own terms. He set himself the ultimate test, a 2-mile swim, all alone across the vast open water of Lake Wentworth. I mean, this wasn't a pool. This was nature, unpredictable and absolutely immense. This was it, the final head-to-head battle with the terror that had haunted him for most of his life. And sure enough, out there in the middle of the lake, it happened. The old terror returned, just a flicker of that old paralysis in his legs. But this time, something was different. He didn't panic. He confronted it. He actually laughed at it and said to the fear itself, "Well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me?" And in the face of that defiance, the terror had no power. It just fled. He just kept swimming. He finished the entire 2 miles. Standing on the far shore, looking back at the lake, he lets out this shout of pure joy. He had finally, truly conquered his fear. It was a moment of just absolute liberation. Now, this whole experience gave Douglas way more than just the ability to swim. It gave him a profound insight into the very nature of fear and death. The wisdom he gained from this struggle would really change how he saw everything from then on. And here it is, the great lesson he learned. Having experienced both the sensation of dying, which, remember, he described as peaceful oblivion, and the stark terror of fearing death, he finally understood the difference. He realized, just as Roosevelt said, that the only thing to truly fear is fear itself. Death, when it actually comes, is peaceful. It's the dread leading up to it that paralyzes us. This experience completely transformed him. I mean, he went from a life of avoidance, constantly held back by fear, to something entirely new. Because he had faced the absolute terror of death and conquered it, his will to actually live became more intense than ever before. He was finally free to climb the peaks and walk the trails, to really embrace the life he'd almost lost. You know, in the end, this isn't just a story about swimming. It's really a testament to the power of determination and the profound freedom that comes from facing our deepest anxieties. And it leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. What fear, big or small, is holding you back? What deep water are you ready to conquer?